It takes some practice. It's
like
so
an
not natural.
imagination. You have to really imagine. Okay. All right. Let's. We're gonna read and translate a little bit. You know, would someone want to read? Anyone want to offer to read and translate? And then I'm gonna just focus on 4 different points, basically words that Rabbeinu says, and we're gonna try to understand what those concepts mean, based on just Ot Aleph. You wanna read? Anyone?
Starting from where, Aleph?
Yeah. So da sheyesh b'lei haTorah.
Sheyesh shebavli haTorah.
Shvilei.
Shehidlei. Shebivlei haTorah. Sheyesh behem hitbonenut gadol me'od. She'i efshar levo lihitbonenut hazot. Ki im al yedei as shirut. Kamo
Shebib shatei.
Shabib Shatei Oraita Im Ein Kamach Ein Torah V'tzarich Shehiyeh Lo Al Kol Panim Parnasa Kamo Chen Lehit Bonanut Hazot Shehu Gadol Ma'od Tzarich Shehiyeh Lo Asirut Gadol Ma'od Asirut Gadol Ashirut Gadol Ma'od Shehiyeh Lo Hon Rav V'lo Tachzar Kol Ba Ki Tzarich Kol Hon Ta'alma Lehit Bonanut Hazot.
Okay, now just translate this first segment. Let's read the translation.
Where is the translation here?
No, there, yeah, with the drop cap.
Page 24. Do you have maybe something yet?
Yeah, here.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a little confusing because it's there.
Okay. No. There are paths of Torah that involve very great contemplation. Such contemplation can be attained only by means of wealth. Just as with the Torah's elementary interpretations, if there is no bread, there is no Torah. And at the very least, one must have a livelihood. So too, for this contemplation, which is very great, a person must have great wealth. One must possess bounteous riches from which nothing is lacking, since this contemplation requires having all the wealth of the world.
Okay, so first introduction here. Rabban was telling us that there is Shvilei HaTorah, okay, paths of Torah. So the first thing that pops to me is, why is anyone that reads this, why is Rabban saying that there's paths of Torah? Why is Rabban not saying that there is Torah itself? That you need a certain, and what's the nafkamina, what's the distinction between a path of Torah and Torah itself? Okay, so let's just hang on to this question as we move through Ot Aleph, and then we'll answer these questions. And the reason we're making this diuk is in the Chai Klalim, right, in the 18 principles of Rabbi Avraham. The second principle is to, when learning Likutei Moharan, to look at every single word that Rabbeinu says and every single letter that Rabbeinu says, and understand that it's intentional. So much so that we should treat it as we are reading Chumash. The same way when we look at Chumash, we know that not one letter is extra or not letter is missing, and that Rashi will sometimes explain why it's written one way, yet it's said another way, or vice versa. Every single letter in the Torah is 100% calculated. So too with Rabbeinu, every single letter is calculated. In fact, Rabbi Natan sometimes would write a lesson, and the Chai Moharan, it says, and Rabbeinu would go look at the lesson, and then he would literally erase one letter. He would go and erase one letter. So we know that one letter, that Rabbeinu was very, very meticulous and very, very specific in the words he used. So to that end, he uses here Shvilei HaTorah, paths of Torah. Okay?
And the principle you just laid out, and that's regarding lessons that are obviously Lashon Rabbeinu.
It's a good question.
Like there's some lesson, right? There's 2 types of lessons. I've always been under the impression there's Lashon Rabbeinu lessons.
And
then
then,
there's-
yeah, well, it's for sure lessons that are Lashon Rabbeinu. And even the lessons that are not, they're still organized. And even if it was not Lashon Rabbeinu, Rabbeinu still reviewed them.
Right.
He still approved them.
Yeah, right. And he started review. Yeah, I don't know.
He would ask Rabbi Natan.
Yeah.
And it might be more relevant to us, because as Rabbi Nassim is really, he's like opening up Rabbeinu for us in a way that the Talmud can understand from inside.
I can double check on that. I can verify that if it's applicable to just Torah Lashon Rabbeinu or other Torah as well, because then the question is it applicable to the Likutei Halachot? Let's just assume that Rabbi Natan and Rabbeinu are very meticulous in their words. They don't use hyperbole. They don't exaggerate. They don't. Even Rabbi Natan says, even when it looks in the Hagdama of Likutei Halachot, he says, even when it looks like I'm repeating myself, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that there's that. But specifically, for sure, in the Torah of Rabbeinu. By the way, last week, someone was sitting there.
Daniel, yeah.
He asked a question, and I had an answer. I double checked the question, and I got a more clear answer. What was the question?
The question was, there's this famous statement from Rabbi Nachman. I think it's in maybe Sichos Moran or Chayei Moran.
Oh no, yeah,
About,
it's not in Sichos or Chayei Moran.
oh no,
It's a Sicha from Levy Yitzchak.
But everyone calls it like what?
Yeah.
Wait, the statement is what that
That you can
Rabbi
knach my words, but not the words of Shulchan Aruch.
Right, don't change any words of Shulchan Aruch, but you can reinterpret your teachings any which way you want, something like.
Right. So, in what context was the question brought up? We said. Oh yeah, we said that the principle or the reason that Rabbi Avram laid out the Chai Klalim was so we can understand what Rabbeinu was using and not misinterpret Rabbeinu's words. Right. So the danger becomes when we take words from Rabbeinu and then we make it fit into our own imagination, and then we misquote him, or even we quote him correctly, but we mischaracterize the words, and then we're taking it out of context, and then all of a sudden it's not anymore what Rabbeinu is saying, it's what I'm saying, right? So Rabbi Avram gives us a guide in the Chai Klalim and says that we want to be as accurate as possible in representing the words of Rabbeinu, and we want to make sure that we're representing him correctly. So someone asked, okay, and how do we reconcile that approach with what Rabbeinu says, that you can take my words and twist it? So I wanted to reply to that. The answer was, Rabbi Avram is teaching us how to learn Rabbeinu. Rabbeinu, that quote is how not to learn Rabbeinu. That quote is telling us this is not how you learn Rabbeinu. So if you're not going to learn Rabbeinu, at least don't distort the Shulchan Aruch, right? So the context of that saying was Rabbeinu was talking about, if you're going to misquote me, or if you're going to twist it, if you're going to knach my words around, then the Shulchan Aruch has a red line you do not cross. He's not telling you to do that. He's telling you in the instance when you're doing that. So it's important to understand the context of how these things are said. That's like the Torah Sheba'al Peh of Breslov is a lot of the quotes from Rabbeinu are taken out of context. So that was the So that's very, very important, because then people take it to places. And Rabbi Avram is telling us how to quote Rabbeinu and how to learn him, how to represent Rabbeinu as accurately as possible through the Chai Klalim. Okay, so that's just as an aside. I wanted to mention it before I forget. Okay, so Rabbeinu is saying that there are paths of Torah, Shvilei HaTorah, that to access these paths, we need to have a tremendous amount of hitbonenut. Okay? So the next question is, what is hitbonenut? And, okay, so I want you to hold on to a few questions. First of all, what is Shvilei HaTorah and how is that different from Torah itself? And the second question is, what is hitbonenut? Okay, what is this? What faculty of our consciousness or our intellect is Itbornut, and how do we identify what this is? Ubnei Yisachar. Someone want to read? We're gonna go like a little. We can go through it. We want to get through from Ubnei Yisachar until like the part of Psolecha.
Okay, so I'll read it.
Yeah.
Okay. Bnei Yisachar, Shehaya lehem zos ha'izbordus bebechinas divrei yamim Bnei Yisachar yodei bina. Lo zachu lezeh ki im al yidei Ashiras bechinas Yisachar chamor golem kargno atir benichsim. Okay, I'll translate that so far. Yeah. Bnei Yisachar had this level of his borndus contemplation, the aspect of pasuk from Divrei Yamim, right? From the Bnei Yisachar, they are men of understanding, Yodei Bina, right? They merited this only by means of Ashiras, the wealth, the aspect of the pasuk says in Bereshis, Yisachar Chamor Golem. The Yisachar is a strong boned donkey, which the Targum Uncle says is Yisachar is abounding with possessions, yeah?
Right, and the context of Yisachar is that they had the agreement with Zevulun, right?
Right.
It was Zevulun that were the traders, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And Otdala Rebbe talks about Zevulun.
Okay, eventually.
Okay, Valken.
It's interesting that he's talking about Yisachar because, like you were saying, the Zvulun's traders. They're the ones that are doing the business.
Correct.
Yeah, but Yisachar is the ones who run.
Well, I would say,
what is this?
even if you split things 50-50,
Yeah.
they're taking half the wealth. That would mean
The
that
source of the
Zevulun-
wealth is Zevulun.
Yeah, it's still Zevulun is the source of the wealth, and they're just as wealthy.
Right.
You know?
Good question. Yeah. But so just as a guide, and I have to take my brother for this. My natural tendency when it comes to learning is always to go deeper.
Yeah.
But it just being familiar with all the concepts first helps you go deeper after.
Okay.
So like I have to work. I know for myself, I have to work hard to just withhold my need to go deeper, but just to cover grounds, and then we go back and we go deeper. So first covering grounds, yeah. But it's a good question.
Okay, so I'll continue, yeah? Valken Moshe v'kol ha'nebi'im haya lehem ashiras gadol ma'od k'dei lebo al yimdo hezbonus hazos machmas sheyesh b'torah hezbonus hazos al ken nikras Torah hon. Yeah, let's translate. Yeah, and this is why Moshe and all the prophets possessed very great wealth, so that they might attain this contemplation through it. And since the Torah involves this contemplation, the Torah itself is therefore called Ashuras, riches, actually called Hatorah Hon. Yeah? Okay.
Keep going.
V'chol mi she'amar derech yadam HaTorah, haya lehem ashuras gadol ma'od, t'hainu Moshe Rabbeinu shehevi HaTorah, l'Yisrael haya asher gadol k'mo she'amar l'zanu zichron livracha, v'chein Rabbi, right? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, shesider ha'chasen ha'mishnayos, וכן רב אשי שהיה חסימס התלמוד, סידר אז כל התלמוד שגם כן היו עשירים גדולים מאוד כמו שאמרו רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה. אוקיי, כי מחלה שתיקנו וסידרו את כל התורה שבעל פה. עבר דרך ידם התורה על כן היו גם כן עשירס הנ"ל כנ"ל, כי צריך עשירס גדול לסבונוס הנ"ל.
Okay, until here. So let's just explain what's happening so far.
Yeah, okay. So this is why the same is true of those through whom the Torah was actually transmitted. They were all extremely wealthy. For example, Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Torah to the Yidden. The Jews was very wealthy. As taught by our sages of blessed memory. Likewise, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who compiled and sealed the Mishnah, and also Rav Ashi, who sealed the Talmud and established its comprehensive framework. They too were extremely wealthy, as taught by our sages of blessed memory, because they established and arranged the entire oral law, and through them the Torah was passed on. They too were wealthy, as explained above. This is because to achieve the aforementioned contemplation, one must possess great wealth.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna pause here. We'll explain a few concepts, and then we'll do the second half of Ot Aleph, and then we'll tie it all together. Okay? So let's explain first of all Shvilei HaTorah. Okay, we have a few questions we want to. Let's address 3 points here. First question is, What is Shvilei HaTorah? What are paths of Torah? Second question is, how do we define hitbonenut? And the third question is, what is this meaning of the Torah passed through their hands? Okay, so let's address all of this, and then that will give us an understanding of what Rabbeinu is trying to say. So Rabbeinu is telling us here that for the paths of the Torah, you need to have a very, very deep understanding of a situational or deep awareness, a hitbonenut, in order to access these pathways. And who are examples of people who've accessed these pathways? We have Moshe Rabbeinu, we have Bnei Yisachar, and we have Rav Ashi, and we have Rebbe. So let's take a look a little bit of what happened first with Rav Ashi and Rebbe, and then that'll give us an understanding of these pathways of the Torah. Okay, to understand this, let's go back to what we spoke about last week. So last week we said, or 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the Rabbi Shimon before opening the Idra. He said that the generation reached a point where the Torah was starting to not stick anymore. There was a point. So he looked at his generation, right? You know, if we can look at our generation, you know, let's say, and say so many people are going off of derech, right? So many people are just not being attached to the Torah. So this is what Rabbi Shimon sees. He sees that for hundreds of years, people had a connection to the Torah, no problem. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the Torah was not appealing anymore. Okay, so he saw a situation of what is called Heferu Toratecha. And he says something needs to be done, something drastic. And they had the conversation that he had to reveal a certain secret. Now, the revelation of certain secrets was forbidden. As we saw, it was forbidden to him to do that, right? So how did he understand? How did he make that call? How was it? It's a very crazy call to make. So now let's look at Rav Ashi and at Rabbi. Asur to write down the Torah Sheba'al Peh. This is the halacha. This is the tzivui. It's forbidden to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh. It was forbidden to write down the Gemara. It was forbidden to write down the Mishnayot. Comes along Rav Ashi and makes the call. He says, "No, we're going to do this," and it was very radical to make such a call. And Sider, and it says Chatam. Sider means he organized it. He decided how to compile it and how to organize it in a written form. And he sealed it. And he said, "This is it. You can't add to it. You can't, this is it." And that's forbidden to do that. Right? So you look at this and you say, how did they make this call? How did they get the ability to understand? So that's the first thing, is to understand that Avar al Yadam HaTorah. Right? The Torah passed through them, which means that they were looking forward at the future of the Torah, and they're saying, what's going to be with the next generation? How can they access the Torah? And they gathered all the Torah from behind them, codified it, wrote it down in a very specific way, and said, this is how the Torah is going to continue. Okay? So that what it means, Avar al Yadam HaTorah. That means now the Torah has an existence forward. That means without doing this, the Torah would cease to exist, and the world would obviously become nil, would cease to exist also. So in order for that to continue happening, in order for the Torah to continue to exist, they had to be able to look at the situation around them and understand that a certain action needs to be taken, and understand what that action was, and seemingly in each one of these cases to take an action that seemingly is counterproductive to the existence of the Torah, right? So to write down the Mishnayot, it looks like you're taking a step backwards. You're writing down something there's a vast library of oral Torah that existed, huge Talmidei Chachamim, and now you're simplifying it. It's almost like I don't know if this is the right example, but the critique people would have to the translation of the Gemara. The critique, whatever that critique is, what's the essence of the critique? That how can you take the Torah and put it into English? And today it's not even a question, but there was a point where it was a question, right? And the same question goes even to the existence of a written Gemara, and the existence of Mishnayot, and the existence of the Zohar. How can you take such secrets and write it down? you're really like minimizing the, right? So it's almost like you're taking the Torah and minimizing its value. So they had to make the call that we need to minimize the value of the Torah in order for the Torah to exist. They needed to do a heferu Toratecha for the kiyum of the Torah. Okay, so that is the explanation of the hitbonenut. Okay, so the hitbonenut in this instance is the ability to make the call and understand what needs to be done. Okay, we'll look into more what that looks like, and so they're able to see something that's not there. So Rav Ashi, Rebbe, they're able to see a future, and they're able to see how things are going to evolve. Right, that's bina. Bina is I see what's coming next. I can see one thing from another, and I see that based on the current trajectory of the Torah and the way it's laid out, the Torah will stop. So with this hitbonenut, they're able to make a call. Now the Shvilei Torah is distinct from the Torah itself, because they're not, both in the case of Rebbe and in the case of Rabbi Shimon and in the case of Rav Ashi, and we'll soon see in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not here. They're not giving us. They're not being mechadish a new part of Torah. They're not telling us new Torah. What they're doing is they're making sure Torah has a pathway to go. They're making sure Torah can keep existing. They're more meta, if you will. It's like, what about the Torah itself? Can it, So whereas you're looking at what does it say in the Torah, they're saying whatever it says, will people even want to listen? Right? It's like, does it even talk to people? They want to know that that's a shvil. A shvil is a pathway. A pathway means something can travel through this, right? Something can go there. So the Torah has to travel. The Torah has to go through this world, right? But these pathways are hidden. That means the idea that you're going to take the Torah and you're going to write it down, it seems obvious after the fact today, but before the fact, it was not obvious. The idea that you're going to do that, and now comes the most radical example of this, the next part here of Psol Lecha. זה בחינת פסול לך.
וזה בחינת פסול לך. Daar is de Mizracha. This is an aspect of this psolacha. And it was psol in this sense. I was trying to do there.
Psol, carve?
To make the, yeah. And okay, so my first question is, how is this related to, how is this psolacha related to Shvila?
Keep reading, you'll see.
Right?
Yeah.
So the Darsha was in the Psolas, which is cool because Psol is the same letter. So Psolas Hayu Shelacha V'Chila. Ki Kemo should be Shater Torah. For example, in this simple explanation of the Torah, Kodem Shein Chadashin is a pshat, and before we bring novelties to whatever simple explanation there is. So have a little more. It's necessary to say the before the introductions. And afterwards, we send out the introductions and we come to understand it.
To the point, right? We discard the intro and we get straight to the point.
And the main part is to understand what's really going on. You're saying the point of it. In all the matters of introductions, and before they are an aspect of solas, is it chaff maybe?
Psolet.
Shavings.
Psolet would be, so like in the literal sense of this pasuk, it's like Moshe Rabbeinu, he took the luchot and he shattered them. right? And then for the second luchot, Hashem gave him a block of sapphire, and he told him to carve it out, and all the remnants of sapphire. Hashem said, "Psolat yushalcha, you keep them; it's yours." So that, okay, so it's like those remnants are valuable, but the point is not the remnants, right? So I'll explain this in a second. Let's just get through the words and I'll explain exactly what it says here.
Sure.
So he's saying, right? So far he says that when you actually, in the Torah itself, if you want to say something, if you want to say a chidush in the Torah, if you want to explain something in the Torah, you have to first give some context. You have to first introduce the concepts. Once you're done introducing the concepts, then you go to your point. But once you have the idea here is your intention. What are you trying to say? You're trying to say something. But in order to say what you're trying to say, you need to give a few introductions, give some explanations, and then you say what you're trying to say. Right? So that's how it works when you're in the Torah itself. So now he's saying, similarly, kmo chen b'hitbonanut haTorah. The same process happens in the contemplation of the Torah.
So this is interesting. This is more like a personal dialogue. So we were talking before about the introductions. It seemed like more of a interactive, like, so we're talking together as friends. But when we're talking these bonus, it's more like the world doesn't exist. It's only like your eyes are closed. Your internal dialogue.
Yes, it's definitely not what you're seeing. It's what you're not seeing.
Yeah. Mochem is bonus Torah. Tzarech lelech mikodem. Misabev chamos sibuv. And so too, in regard to the contemplation of Torah, it's necessary to go before and go around a number of times.
Yeah.
Al-Shibayim el-Mechuvan v'Ikruhu al-Mechuvan. I apologize, I'm realizing it's a bit small for me. I'm having trouble reading this, so bear with me. Until one comes to understanding, and the main part of his understanding, and all of these going around, they are an aspect of the psolas.
Yeah.
And they're an aspect of, wow, this is beautiful, this is amazing. When he's saying the Hamilkinas, this is talking about the psolas.
Yeah.
And that's an aspect of this wealth. Wow, that's amazing. And through this psolas, which is the aspect of wealth, he's coming to his bonus.
So let's break this down. What he's saying here, and let's tie it into what we just said about the Shvilei HaTorah. So what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu? What's the story that happened with Moshe Rabbeinu and how he broke the luchot? Let's just go through the story a little bit. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes down with the luchot. What does he see? He sees that the Torah that Am Yisrael just received is done. Am Yisrael is doing the opposite of the Torah. Okay, so he sees in front of him the same situation that Rabbi Shimon saw, the same situation that Rav Ashi saw, the same situation that Rebbe saw, but in a very radicalized way he sees it. He sees the Torah is now stopping to exist. What can I do to make sure that the Torah can keep existing? Right? So I think in all of our lives, we can all, especially if you have a Baal Tshuva background, you can definitely relate to this. That means you can look around you to people, maybe you're enlightened. You understand that you need the Torah for life. And you look around you at your friends or people you care about, people you love, and they just don't get it. They're missing it. And you're looking at them and you're like, what can I do? How can I communicate to these people that like
Sorry, I feel like an ex-smoker. What are you going to smoke for? What are you going to do that for? What are you, nuts?
yeah, and you're like, right, and obviously just doing that is not going to work, right? So in a very similar sense, Moshe Rabbeinu was looking at this, right, and he's like, okay, there's no point in screaming at Am Yisrael. There's no point. My point is the Torah needs to exist. So what does he do? So now this is not Pshatei HaTorah. This is Hitbonenut HaTorah, right? So now he's trying to understand how to keep the Torah existing in a path. Because the path has ended, there's Egel happening in front of him. And he comes to the conclusion, destroy the Torah. Take the Luchot, throw them onto the floor. His understanding is by, right? We know that it says Yashar Kochacha Sheshibarta, that Hashem told him you did a good job, that you broke it. I saw Chazal that says that he didn't break it until he heard from Hashem that he has to break it. So it might be, elementary interpretation might be he got mad and he threw it. What Rabbeinu was explaining to us, and it's lining up with what Chazal was saying, is that him throwing the luchot onto the floor, he figured out a way to keep the Torah alive. By destroying the Torah, he was going to keep the Torah alive. And that's such a, it's an avera. It's an avera to throw the Torah onto the floor. It's an avera, right?
Yeah.
But it's the avera is within the Torah, right? Within the Torah, there's an avera. Moshe Rabbeinu was already behind the Torah. He wants the Torah to exist, right? So he has to he has to break the Torah down in a way that it'll have a pathway of existence, right? So just to tie it back to what we spoke last week and why the introduction of last week in the Zohar was so important, this itbonenut, this is called atik. That means Moshe Rabbeinu was accessing a point before the Torah. He's going behind the Torah, right? Atik means ancient. The Torah, you can say, existed at this point. Before the Torah, what was there, right? Before the Torah was brought into this world, there was an existence of the Torah, right? The roots of the Torah always existed. So the roots of the Torah are called atik. And the tzaddikim, they had a certain itbonenut that they're able to go into atik, and when they go into atik, they can bring back out the Torah in a way that is accessible for the next generation or for that situation, right? It's almost like it's like a master key. Maybe you come and you see the Torah doesn't work. So like it's the opposite of the Reform movement. The Reform movement says the Torah doesn't work, you change the Torah, right? The Reform movement have the need of that movement, you could say, comes from a good place. They're looking at the situation, they're saying there's an incompatibility with the Torah and the society that, right? So, and how often do you speak to people and say, what does this not driving a Chaburas have to do with my life? Like, who cares? Like, right? And essentially what you're saying is...
It's in the way.
There's an incompatibility with the Torah and the reality. So to make it compatible, right? This is what the tzaddikim always do. The tzaddikim, they don't want to shove the Torah down. They don't want, you have to do it. They want us to see that the Torah is life. They want us to feel it. Rabbi Shimon, the big revolutionaries of the Torah, they all had this character trait, that they're able to go into the root of the Torah, and then because they access the root, they're able to bring it back down. Without this itbonenut, right? You won't be able to do that. Without this itbonenut, you're looking at the Torah, you don't get the roots, and then you start modifying the Torah as you see it. And that's where you break the Shulchan Aruch, and that's where you get, reform movements, because they're trying to change the Torah. The ability to change the Torah in a way where it stays the Torah, you need a very deep itbonenut. And this is the characteristics of Moshe Rabbeinu.
What do you think is a connection between this and the Likutei Moharan you found? How does that fit in?
So just I want to say in a point.
Yeah.
Resh Bebet. Right?
Yeah, because Moshe Rabbeinu, we learned after he broke the Luchos, we went back to Hashem, and then he says, "Here's all the Likutei Moharan Chabura," and that's the derech that he was able to.
So that's it.
Hashem.
That's atik.
That's Atik.
That's Atik. The Nekudat Tovot means
Wow.
we are Atik in our roots. Later on in the Torah, Rabbeinu. By the way, the only Torah where you can mix, and as a general rule, not to mix Torahs, the only Torah you could mix is Reish Bebet, because Rabbi Natan says Reish Bebet is a foundation of everything. Azarma is a foundation of all the other Torah of Rabbeinu, and you will see Rabbi Natan in many places throughout Likutei Halachot taking a Torah that he's building on Likutei Halachot, but then he'll splice in Reish Bebet. He'll splice in a Zarma and bring it into the picture, because a Zarma is a very foundational Torah. That's just as an aside. So here he's saying the psolet, right? He's saying here that the psolet. So now there's another concept I just want to highlight here that Rabbeinu was saying here, that there is something that's called a psolet and a mechuvan. Right? Everyone sees it? The psolet and the mechuvan?
Psolet is the shaving percent, right? The leftovers. What's the distinction between the two?
The psolet and the mechuvan.
Yeah, I'm asking that.
Yeah. I'm saying you see these, it's a simple understanding of what Rabbeinu was saying here. That he says that the idea that you have to give context in order to get your point, right? This is just a natural two-step process, right? You have to have a hagdama, and then you have to get to the point. And here he's saying, and then he layers in ashirut. So now, let's look at wealth for a second. Wealth, there's the sixth principle. I just want to introduce you to the sixth principle. This is a very, to me, as soon as I learned this principle, it opened up everything, it changed everything, and how we understand Sifrei Emet, Sifrei Kabbalah, and just the world in general. The sixth principle is a very known principle that we all know, that's called Zeh Le'umat Zeh. That means Hashem created a parallel for good and for bad, right? But there's two ways to understand what Zeh Le'umat Zeh is. So we could say there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, and they go against each other. The very, Star Warsy kind of way of thinking about it. But then there's also Rabbi Avram says it's called Kof Bifnei Adam. Kof Bifnei Adam is the mimicry idea of Zeh Le'umat Zeh. That evil mimics good. Effectively, that means for us that good and evil look the same. That we cannot see the difference between the two. Traditionally, we think of good and evil as, you know the bad guy when you see it, right? He's a bad guy, and the good guy looks like a good guy. But if we look, especially if we look at the story of the Lost Princess,
I would say maybe we might not be able to yet see the difference
between
good and how, you're saying evil mimics good. But to say that we can't is like an absolute.
No,
I don't think that's true.
Fine. So there is a way to know the difference.
Yeah.
There is a way. Okay, but first they look the same.
Yeah.
First we have to understand they look the same, right? So in the story of the Lost Princess, he finds the palace, right, off the side of the road, and then there he sees that's the bad place, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But Rabbeinu makes a point to say it looked beautiful, right?
Wow.
So that's this idea. That's the definition. The Kabbalistic term for evil is what? Sitra Achra. What's the definition of word Sitra Achra?
Other side.
Other side. It's just the other side. It doesn't mean evil. It just means the other side, right? It's like a mirror. Sitra Achra. You look at the mirror. What is the mirror doing? It's just flipping whatever it sees in front of it, right? So that's the nature of evil. Why are we saying that? Because the way the distinction between good and evil is always an intention. It's in the intention. It's why you're doing it. So two people can be doing the exact same thing and have two different intentions. So the behavior presents the same way, but the good intention and the bad intention is how we define it between good and evil.
And that's some things that I would say mutar. And then Maisa looks
Right, but
like
domelo.
mutar.
But domelo,
But
right?
domelo is tolerable.
Right. So you see this everywhere. people will say, for example, in the current conflict with Israel,
Yeah.
people will present arguments, right, that seems right. It seems right. The words of your argument are right, but the whole intention of the argument is wrong. Right? So we were saying that the distinction between good and evil is not necessarily, there's a traditional sense where there's literally good and bad, right? And they're opposite each other. They look opposite, they are opposite. And then there is the mimicry sense of kof bifnei adam, like a monkey mimic. So when a monkey, if I take a cup and I pour it, I take a drink, I pour it into the cup, and then I drink it. A monkey will do the exact same thing. The difference is, when I do it, I'm not pouring this into a cup. That's not what I'm doing. I'm drinking, and this is how I drink, right? It's all about drinking. The monkey, what the monkey is doing, he's not drinking. He's mimicking what I'm doing. He has no idea what he's doing. He's just taking the actions that I'm doing, and he's doing the same thing. Whereas I am just finding a way to drink, right? And I could do it this way, I could do it another way. It doesn't make a difference, right? Like the whole basis of programming is that idea. Is that you teach it the behavior, and it copies the behavior that you teach it. It doesn't know why. The programmer is the intent, right? And then the machine does it. So that's the whole idea of good versus evil. And in the context of this Torah, it's this. Rabbeinu says that ashirut, wealth, is the psolet. Okay? So let's look at an example. What's the difference if wealth is the introduction or if wealth is the purpose? What's the difference between those two scenarios? That means in both scenarios there's wealth, right? Look at Rabbi, okay? Rabbi that did the Mishnayot, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he was wealthy. He was a prince. He was called Rabbi Yehuda the prince. He was very wealthy. But for him, Rabbeinu says, the purpose of his wealth was just as a means to get to something deeper. He needed that wealth in order to have that hitbonanut to make sure that the Torah keeps existing. The wealth was not the purpose. The wealth was the means, right? The sibuvim around to get to the point. On surface level, you don't see that, right? You have the stories of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the Caesars. They're having discussions. They're both very wealthy people, and you're like, "What's the difference between me and you?" Right? How often in the Gemara you have these stories? I'm rich, you're rich, we're the same, right? And so, because on the surface it looks the same. Here's one rich guy, he has a beard, and here's another rich guy, he's a Roman, and they're both have palaces, and they're both very wealthy. The difference is not in the wealth, and the wealth doesn't make it good or bad. The difference is what is the purpose of the wealth, right? And that is the sixth principle. Is the Klal Shishi of Rabbi Avram's Chai Klalim lays this out, that it's throughout all of the Likutei Moharan, there is this idea that good and bad mimic each other and they look the same, and everything that has in the Torah has a evil version of it that looks exactly the same way, and it's our job to identify the intention of it, and that's how it goes from good to evil. So in the case of wealth, when the wealth serves the Torah, the wealth is necessary. But when we think of wealth, or the Western way of thinking of wealth, is that the wealth is the goal. The American dream, right? What's a dream? A dream is your deepest desire, so to speak, right? So your deepest desire is the wealth. That everything leads to the wealth, right? So that's the key distinction is, you can have wealth, but why? I have wealth because I worked my entire life and all this, and I did all the savings, and I went through everything, and I immigrated from this country all so that I could have this wealthy lifestyle, right? So that's the intention of wealth, when everything is for the wealth. That's the mechuvan. The reverse is, I'm using wealth to get to the Torah. I don't care about the wealth. The wealth doesn't matter to me. I just need it, right? I need this wealth right now to give me that level of hitbonanut. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu, when he had to make the decision to redo the Torah again, he needed to be wealthy. right? So the shavings of the sapphire gave him all the wealth to be able to bring the Torah back into reality. He had that hitbonanut. But the wealth was necessary to have that hitbonanut. And Rabbeinu, just as preparation for next week, Rabbeinu says the wealth should be a type of wealth that nothing is lacking. Right? You know, I don't know if you've met, you must have met, everyone here probably met someone who has the Black American Express? There's one that just doesn't have a limit. Which one is it? The black one? I don't know.
No idea.
I think
that's
there's
several pay grades above me.
Yeah.
No, but I don't know if I know someone the right, but I've heard of this card. Imagine what it's like living with this card. You just swipe. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make.
I have heard of people. They'll go into a restaurant, take out the wine list, and find something they like, order it. It'd be like $400 a bottle, and not even think twice. Like. It's
I
just
once
like,
went to,
what do you mean you can't buy this wine? What are you talking about? Of course, like, sorry, not everybody has money like you have, you know?
Right. So I was. Where was it? I was not that expensive suit store in Yorktown.
Harvey Rosen.
Harry Rosen.
Yeah.
I went to the Harry Rosen once. I was looking for a Shabbos shirt. I'm like, maybe I'll find something. I started asking the guy how much is it. And the guy looks at me. He says, if you're asking, you can't afford it.
Yeah, so just thinking that.
He told me
If
that.
you gotta
straight up.
ask,
If you're
you
asking,
can.
you can't afford it. So I'm like, all right, never mind, bye bye. But the point is, there's a certain mindset when you don't care about the price tag, not right. So there's the evil version of not caring about the price tag, and then there's the Torah version of not caring about the price tag. The evil version of not caring about the price tag means you don't care about the wealth. You're drenched in it. The Torah version is you have so much of it that the wealth is not the importance. That's why I don't care about it, because it's not important. There's a version of it where you don't care because the wealth is important, and I have so much of it, that's why I don't care. So the bottom line is, though, we need to have that feeling that in the nefesh of a person, when there's no stress. There's no stress about debt. There's no stress about parnasa. There's no stress about, there's just so much money that I can do whatever I want. That mindset is an access point into this hitbonanut. And we will address the fact that this is seemingly something that's not accessible to everyone. Right? Unlimited wealth. V'lo techsar kol ba, Rabbeinu says. You don't feel anything lacking. You don't feel like there's anything lacking. You don't feel a financial limitation. You don't feel it. The mindset of not feeling a financial limitation is freeing in the sense that it gives you access to this hitbonanut. Okay, so that's it for today. I want to just review everything. Let's just go over everything we discussed and make some seder. And if anyone has any questions, we can cover that too.
We get toward the end. We stopped shy.
We stopped. I don't know. V'zeh b'chinat p'sol lecha, but.
Okay.
Well, the end. I'll you know what? I'll just do quickly the end because it's right. It flows right in. V'zeh b'chinat p'sol lecha, p'solet yiyu shelecha, misham nitashen Moshe. Right, and this is what the pasuk says: p'sol lecha. The shavings should be for you, right? When Moshe Rabbeinu was carving out the second luchot from the sapphire, Hashem told him that you can keep all the shavings, and from these shavings, Moshe Rabbeinu became very rich. That means the riches of this shavings are the outside layer. They're like the hagdamot. They're the introduction to the idea. They're not the intention. That means there's Moshe Rabbeinu need to get to this hitbonanut. He need to get to this understanding to understand what's next for Am Yisrael, and to get there and to understand what's the future for Am Yisrael and how the Torah can keep existing. He needed to go through an outer phase, right? The outer phase, or the prerequisite, is the ashirut, the riches, and this wealth gave Moshe an entry. Through this ashirut, through this wealth, one can access this contemplative state where you can understand how to open up a pathway for the Torah. And then Rabbeinu brings a way to remember this. V'zeh otiot mamon. Mammon is Misham Nita Asher Moshe. The Rashi Tevot of the word Mammon, the acronym of Mammon is from there Moshe became wealthy. V'avav, right? But we're missing a vav because Mammon is mem, vav, nun. So the first mem is Misham. The second mem is Moshe, right? And the nun is Nita Asher. Misham, Nita Asher, Moshe. And then we have the vav. Right? So from there, from where? So the question is, if you just look at from there, so the vav answers the from where. Ve'avavu b'chinat haluchot, from the luchot. Why does vav represent the luchot? Why does the letter vav represent the luchot? Shemisham Nita Asher, Moshe. Ki haluchot orkan vav v'rochban vav. Because the luchot were 6 by 6, so they and vav is 6. Okay.
That's very cool because this world that we exist in here is 6 direction.
How so? Isn't
When
it
you
4?
shake a lulav, right?
Oh, I see what you mean. 3D.
It's 3D.
Yeah.
It's 6.
Up and down. Up and down. Interesting. Okay, so just to summarize everything we spoke about today, Rabbeinu now is introducing us the idea that there is a pathway for the Torah. A pathway for the Torah means a pathway for the Torah to keep existing. And these intersections have happened in our history of Jewish people. The most famous one is Moshe Rabbeinu. He needed to create a new pathway for the Torah because the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, we did the Egel, and that sort of blocked the Torah from continuing to exist. And Moshe Rabbeinu had to find a new way to make the Torah exist. So too, we saw in the introduction in the last year, Rabbi Shimon had to create a pathway for the Torah because he saw that the generation was losing touch with the Torah, and we see that Rav Ashi also had to. They were at key points in our history where if they didn't make this revolution, the Torah would stop to exist. So these key points that they found the ways to put the Torah in, these are called pathways. Just as an aside, Rabbeinu uses the word shvil. In the story of the lost princess, where are you holding in the story?
It's about halfway.
Do you remember what point in the story?
Oh. He's in the palace and he can eat freely, and
He's in the
the
palace.
queen is called, and he eats and he falls asleep.
So before the palace, remember how he found the palace?
It was a path.
That's right.
It's just off the field or something. He says back and forth. Finally, he sees a path. He says, okay, I haven't gone this way yet. I'm going to try it.
Okay, so that's just something to think about. That Rabbeinu says Shvil min atzad in the story of Sipur Masiot, which is on this lesson is connected to Sipur Masiot. So just if you're ever stuck and you're trying to understand something in the Torah, you can go use Sipur Masiot as an index or as a key, and vice versa. If you're trying to understand something in Sipur Masiot, you can use the concepts that we're learning here to unlock some understandings in the specific story of the Lost Princess, because they were told together. This lesson and the Lost Princess, they were told as one unit. So Rabbeinu says in the story of the Lost Princess that at one point, after he looked everywhere, he saw a shvil. Right? So you can see that there's a parallel between the situation that Moshe Rabbeinu was in also. That he couldn't find. He couldn't find the Torah. And then he found the shvil. Right? And the shvil is hidden. It's not obvious. You can't see it. There was a path from the side, right?
Yeah.
It means it's not something that you see. So this is something that has to happen. That means in order for the Torah to keep existing, we need to access this pathway. And if we connect it to what we learned last week, we know that these pathways are so ancient. We're going all the way to be the root of the Torah, right? It means the Torah needs a pathway to exist. The root of the Torah is where we're like, oh, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to tell him in order to understand what I'm trying to say. And sometimes it's not traditional, right? You can't use the words of the Torah. You use, and this is why Rabbeinu says later on in the lesson that it's Sipur Masiot. These pathways are Sipur Masiot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super must.
Yeah, Sipur Masiot means the telling of tales.
Okay.
That means sometimes you want to communicate something to someone, you can't tell them directly what you're trying to say. It's too harsh. You can't just say, dude, you just can't drive on Shabbos. You can't say that. It's just not gonna work. He's like, you understand what you're doing? Like, did you realize that if you drive on Shabbos, you can't say that? It's not gonna work. It's not gonna get through to him, right? So you're not creating a pathway for the Torah to keep existing, right? So the way to do it is Sipur Masiot. You tell him a story that's seemingly nothing to do with keeping Shabbos. And then the connections are made on a very, very deep level. And then somehow later on, he draws his own conclusion that he needs to keep Shabbos. So these deep, deep ideas on how to connect dots that are on a surface level not connected is this hitbonanut that Rabbeinu was telling us. That this hitbonanut is you have to look behind the scenes to be able to see how the Torah can keep existing. And aval al yadam haTorah means we want the Torah to go through. I had a thought that it says that they need all these key people here were all rich and wealthy. I had a thought that there was a specific Jew that tried to revolutionize the Torah through him, but he didn't succeed, and he created Christianity.
Wow.
And I think he attempted to do this.
An idea of Paul.
And I think he was poor.
I don't know if he was poor or not. But from what I understand, from what I heard, I'm not saying it's a kosher source per se, but what I heard was they saw there was a running conflict with this new Judaism, quote unquote, and the real Judaism. And he said, look, he says, I can go and redirect it away. It's just that it's obvious it's not a competition, but I don't wish to be cursed as a heretic because I effectively have to give up being righteous. And it'll appear like, but the idea was to kind of get it off the crash course, so it doesn't take over.
Right, and
So
unfortunately,
on the surface, it appears like he gave up Orthodox Judaism to reform the church, as it were.
I heard this.
But he did it in a way to save Judaism, but not to. But he had to sacrifice himself as part of it. He didn't want to. He said,
Rabbeinu says there are instances where this actually happened, and Judaism was lost. And we don't even know that. That's why Rabbeinu was so against Mefursamim Shel Sheker. Rabbeinu had a bone to pick with Mefursamim Shel Sheker for this exact reason. Because he said there are certain famous people that don't make it obvious that they're not selling Torah. And they pull people in thinking that this is Torah.
No, he wasn't doing that. He did this.
He did the opposite.
He did the opposite. No, this is not Torah. We're going to take it this way and make a whole new religion. And we're not even calling it Torah. We're calling it this.
So Rabbeinu was saying there's people who do the opposite, who say we're calling it Torah, and it's not Torah. And Rabbeinu says they look like rabbis.
Messianic.
They
Messianic.
No, not even Messianic. No, this is even more subtle.
Yeah.
This is
within
people.
the world of Torah
This is people that they look kosher, they follow halacha, they do everything 100%.
I've heard about people today.
We don't know.
Uncertain.
We don't know.
There's a couple of people I know of today. That,
Rabbeinu says there's a huge forces within Am Yisrael that have thousands of people. Yeah. In his time today, they
It's his time
I was
today.
thinking it's more.
Their souls come before the creation of the world. Even.
they look like rabbis. They have thousands of Jewish families following them.
Yeah. They talk like rabbis, look like rabbis.
We may even think that they're rabbis. How do we? even
If your
know?
wife wants to go to the beach on Shabbos, you should drive her. No problem.
So that's
Shalom
obvious to you, but then
Bayit.
it gets more subtle. It goes more subtle, and then there's no reason to see. There's nothing. What's wrong with him? What's wrong? Rabbeinu was talking about the ones that are. Rabbeinu was most worried about the ones that are most subtle. The more subtle it is, the more dangerous it is,
Right.
because then it's really Judaism, but it's not, right? That's the big danger. That's the big danger is when we can't detect. We can detect that there's evil in front of us. That's the biggest danger, and that's why Rabbeinu was very worried about. Rabbeinu said, just be careful with fame. And the final point that we spoke about today was the idea of psolet. Psolet meaning that in order to get to the point, you must go through the outside layers. This is something that hit me. I like, sometimes.
So is this another principle or is this?
No, this is not another principle. This is what Rabbeinu says. The principle was, we did today 2 principles. We did principle number 2, which
Every
is
letter counts.
every letter counts. And principle number 6.
This evil mimics good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so now this principle is that sometimes when you get the point, like I see it now with my son's learning how to play hockey. Okay, and he wants to already do like stuff.
Tricks.
Yeah, tricks, whatever. I don't play hockey. And I see that he needs to work on his skating, right? So it's like, you can't skip the basics. You can't.
Music's the same thing. You've got to learn the basics. It's good to
With
learn some
music.
stuff on the way, but you've got to have the basic
And it's-
techniques and the skill that you have to build, and it takes time.
And when you see the intention,
Right.
it almost like the basics are so insignificant, you don't even want to care about it, right? So think about someone like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the intention, and to him, money was so insignificant. But still, Hashem said, go through it. Become wealthy. For Moshe Rabbeinu, wealth didn't mean nothing to him. It had no bearing on him. It meant nothing.
Right.
But he knew that this is a foundation that he needed to have to enter into this contemplation. And this is also a rule that in order to get to the point, you must, Rabbeinu says, you have to go around and around, right? The around is you're not getting to the point. I don't know, you're practicing, to get your finger like this, right? So it's how much can you do this? I want to already do the song or whatever it is.
You have to have a little bit of doing some songs to make it fun and keep you going.
Yeah, because then
You
you
got to
just
have a
burn
little
out.
bit. Just doing skills is not, but you have to always.
Right. So
Basically.
that's the final thing here. That's called the psolet. That's the psolet. And by the way, Rabbeinu says the entire Likutei Moharan is psolet. Psolet of psolet.
Which is cool because we're talking about the idea of dhammas, introductions, and stories.
Right. And Rabbeinu says that the Likutei
It is
Moharan is
introductions.
introductions. Yes.
It all goes back to the beginning.
So if Likutei Moharan is the introduction,
Wow.
what is he introducing? He's introducing what? So that makes perfect sense. We see introductions as insignificant, but Rabbeinu is putting a lot of significance into introductions. He's putting a lot of significance into Hagdama, because the Hagdama is effectively the path. With the right introduction, the Torah flows right through it. With bad introductions, it stops. Introductions are not just something you just put at the beginning of a book. Right? The Arizal uses the word introduction a lot. Hagdama. The Arizal uses Hagdama this, Hagdama that. Introductions are a very serious thing. With the right introductions, things will. You invest all your energy in introductions, and then the rest falls. You do the rest by yourself, and that was Rabbeinu's approach, right? And that's Rabbeinu's telling us that. Rabbeinu's saying that's what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Moshe Rabbeinu was just worried about the introduction. I want the Jewish people to have a good vessel for which the Torah can go through. So that is the psolet, right? So in what's the word? Compared to what you're trying to do, it almost seems like it's insignificant, but it's necessary. It's necessary. It's the key. It's almost like without this, nothing matters. And that's what Rav Ashi understood. That's what Rebbe understood. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu understood. That's what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai understood. The Zohar is also an introduction. It's like, I want the Torah to keep going, so I'm going to introduce you this entire framework by which how to see the world, and now the whole Torah will make a whole lot more sense to you, based on your needs for this generation. Okay, so that's what we got for today. Any questions? Questions? Any?
Have you got an English copy of the principles, how to learn?
Yeah. So we said last time we met in the first volume of the Torah, in the version, in the back of it, one of the appendices, I think it's called, they have all the principles
Very
in
nice.
English.
But honestly, the principles need to be a book
It's not alright. I'm saying
in Hebrew.
in Hebrew probably is. No?
There's a few.
There's a few. Yeah.
There's a few in Hebrew. I know Rav Besançon wrote one in Hebrew. Rav Besançon, in French. You know, Rav Besançon is the painter. He wrote one in Hebrew. I have it at home. It's called Mesilat HaKsharim. He wrote a whole book on the Chaykalim. I know there's another one on the Chaykalim. The difference between the Chaykalim and not the Chaykalim is that the Chaykalim is essentially like letting you into Rabbeinu's world. Without the Chaykalim, you feel like you're on the outside. You're staring at Rabbeinu, but you're still sitting on the outside. You're not in his world. And that's like Rabbi Avram says, that's the difference between Torah to Eretz Yisrael and not Torah to Eretz Yisrael. When we talk about the Torah, like it's some concept, it's an idea. There's this internal separation where there's my life, and then there's the Torah, right? And that's chutz la'aretz. That's the idea of chutz la'aretz. Eretz Yisrael, right? The people of Eretz Yisrael have one experience, and the people outside of Eretz Yisrael are looking into the story. They're like spectators. They're not playing the sport. They're watching it, right? So and as you're invested, right? You're fans. You're invested. You care about everything, but you're not in the story. And there's that feeling many times with Likutei Moharan that you're watching Rabbeinu do something, but you're not part of the story. But the Chai Kalim really pulls you into the story. That's what it pulls you in. It pulls you right in. It's about me. It's talking about you feel that the Torahs are relevant, they're real.
It's Kedai really.
It's Kedai 100% to invest in the. I got lucky. My brother introduced me to someone who taught it to me, and I learned it in Hebrew. If anyone wants, I can share you the recordings. It's like 6 years old, but they're in Hebrew. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to share it. I would highly recommend learning the Klalim with a Torah live. So I'm going to try my best to introduce whatever Klalim we need as we learn it. Because if you don't see the Klalim in action, it's hard to, right? So hopefully whenever we come up, you'll see, you're going to have questions. It's inevitable. We're going to have questions and the answers are answered with the Klalim. We'll open. But yeah, there's been significant work done in the Hebrew world that I'm aware of for the Klalim. Yes, something needs to be done in the English world. I think we're tapped. It's the next frontier.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm telling you, I know. I'm telling you. You look at the Klalim, you're gonna see what a gift. And Rabbi Avram, I don't know, he hides himself. Rabbi Avram and Rav Nachman, he hides himself. He hides himself so much. It's like, what is this? Rav Kook said on Rabbi Avram and Rav Nachman that he's the moach of the world.
The what of the world?
The mind of the world.
When
Rav Kook.
When he was third generation.
They had
Avram was
Rabbi Avram was, so we have Rav Nachman, Rav Nassan, Rav Nachman of Tulchin, Rabbi Avram.
Wait, so you're saying Rav Kook said that?
Yeah, they had correspondence. They were friends.
Oh, they lived at the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, so that was very recent. And Rav Kook.
Fuck,
It
yeah.
was after, before...
Like early 1900s.
Yeah.
Early 1900s.
That's during the late 30s, mid-30s, 1930s.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Right at turn of the century
so
with the World War
Like
One.
after World War One.
Yeah. Like you see in Koch Ve'or, Rabbi Avram talks about the hot air balloon. They invented the hot air balloon.
Oh, wow.
Or one of them. They invented some sort of flying machine.
He lived in Oman?
I don't know. He I can show you. You have Koch Ve'or?
Yeah,
maybe.
No, I don't have
You don't have Koch Ve'or?
But some of the English farms have like a brief, like history, like a very brief bio of certain, Breslev Tzaddikim.
I believe he was.
Sure, it's here.
End of the-
I picked up that book, yeah. You're Abraham Chazan, right?
Yeah. Abraham Chazan Halevi,
Abraham ben Nachman. Yeah, he lived until 1917.
1970.
You can maybe press the
Sure.
record
That's
button off.
like